For 71 days, a 95-pound Doberman named Tank lived in the back corner of a shelter kennel and refused to come out. He didn't bark, he didn't beg, he just pressed himself into cold concrete, faced the wall, and waited for the world to give up on him the way it always had. And everyone did give up. Everyone except an 11-month-old baby who crawled across a living room floor one afternoon and changed everything. This is the story of the day Tank finally turned around. Paige Connolly had fostered a lot of dogs. She and her husband Wes lived on a quiet street in Boulder, Colorado, with their daughter Junie, who was 11 months old and had just figured out how to crawl at terrifying speed. Paige had a rule now. She only took the easy ones, the friendly ones, the ones who got adopted fast. With a baby in the house, she couldn't afford anything else. That was the rule. And then Donna called from the county shelter. Donna had run the Boulder shelter for 19 years, and Paige had never once heard her voice sound the way it did on that call. "There's a Doberman here," Donna said. "He's out of time on Friday." And Paige, "I can't watch it happen with this one." His name was Tank, a name the shelter staff had given him half as a joke because he was the biggest dog they had ever taken in and also somehow the most frightened. He had been surrendered by a man who never gave a reason, who just set the leash on the counter and walked out. Whatever had happened to Tank before that counter, nobody knew, but the proof was all over him. He flinched when a hand came up too fast. He had a notch torn from one ear and a thin white scar across his muzzle. And from the day he arrived, he did one thing and one thing only. He backed himself into the corner of Kennel 9, faced the wall, and stayed there. 71 days. Volunteers sat outside his gate and read to him. Nothing. They left the door wide open. He didn't move. Finally, the shelter behaviorist wrote 3 words on his file that meant the end of the road for a dog his size and his breed: not safely adoptable. Paige drove out to see him with no intention of taking him. She just wanted to understand what Donna was asking. She crouched outside Kennel 9 for almost an hour. Tank never turned around, but right before she stood to leave, one ear swiveled back toward her, just barely, like some small broken part of him still wanted to know whether she was staying. She signed the foster papers that afternoon. Wes was not happy. "We have a baby, Paige," he said that night, keeping his voice low. "A terrified 95-pound dog we know nothing about. What if he snaps?" Paige didn't have a good answer. All she had was the memory of that one ear turning back toward her. Tank arrived on a Sunday and found his corner within 90 seconds, a narrow gap behind the living room couch, and that was where he lived. He came out only at night when the house was dark and quiet to eat the food Paige left out and drink in long, nervous gulps. If anyone walked into the room, he froze. If anyone came too close, he trembled. For the first 2 weeks, Paige wasn't sure she had brought home a dog at all. She had brought home a ghost that happened to weigh as much as she did. I can see you're still here, but you haven't subscribed yet. That stings a little. Hit subscribe. You'll want to be here when Tank turns around. For a month, nothing changed. Paige tried everything she knew. Patience, distance, a trail of treats toward the corner that Tank waited until midnight to take. Wes started counting down the foster period out loud, the way you count down something you want to be over. And then came the night that almost ended it all. A pot lid slipped off the counter and crashed onto the kitchen tile. Tank exploded out of his corner in pure panic, a blur of muscle and terror. And in his scramble to get away, he knocked over a lamp and sent it shattering across the floor a few feet from where Junie sat in her bouncer. Junie wailed. Paige snatched her up, and Wes stood in the doorway with a look that said everything there was to say. That's it. He goes back. That night, after Junie was finally asleep and the broken glass was swept up, Paige sat down on the kitchen floor across the room from the couch, just close enough that Tank could see her, and she talked to him in a low voice for almost an hour. She told him she was sorry for whatever had been done to him, sorry the world was about to give up on him one more time. Tank watched her from the dark gap behind the couch and did not come out, but he didn't look away either, and that, she would understand much later, was the first crack in the wall. Because here's the thing nobody had counted on. Junie was not afraid of Tank. From the very beginning, the baby had been fascinated by the big, dark shape behind the couch. She would crawl in his direction and babble at him, and Paige would scoop her up and steer her away every single time, her heart in her throat. Junie didn't understand danger. She only understood that there was someone in the corner who was always there, always watching her with soft, worried eyes, and she wanted to say hello. And slowly, in spite of everything, Tank started showing them who he actually was. Not a monster, a coward. A magnificent 95-pound coward. He was, it turned out, terrified of the most ridiculous things on Earth. The dishwasher reduced him to a puddle. A single balloon left over from Junie's half-birthday sent him skidding around the corner on the hardwood like a cartoon. One afternoon, Paige set a cucumber on the floor near his corner just to test a theory, and Tank stared at it like it was a live grenade and would not come out until she took it away. This was the dog the file had called not safely adoptable, a dog who could be defeated by a vegetable. The first time Tank ever wagged his tail, Paige cried in the kitchen for 10 minutes. It was barely a wag, 2 slow sweeps against the hardwood while he watched Junie stack blocks from across the room. But after 71 days against a wall and weeks behind a couch, 2 sweeps of a tail felt like the whole sky cracking open. There were other tiny signs if you knew how to look. Tank started eating while Paige was still in the room, as long as she kept her back to him. He started sleeping with his head out of the gap instead of buried in it. Once, when Junie dropped her cup and started to fuss, Paige saw his whole body lean toward the baby, like he wanted to help and didn't know how. They were small things. They were not, Wes said gently, enough. Not with a baby in the house, not on a clock. The foster period was ending. They hadn't made real progress, and they had a child to think about. Paige called Donna on a Tuesday and told her, with a lump in her throat, that they would bring Tank back on Saturday. Donna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the words they both already knew. "You understand what bringing him back means." Paige understood. She hung up the phone, sat down on the living room floor, and cried, with Tank watching her from his corner and Junie playing on her mat a few feet away. She had 3 days left to give him. She didn't know she would only need 1. It happened on a Thursday at 4:18 in the afternoon, while Paige was folding laundry and not watching closely enough. Junie, faster than she had any right to be, crawled straight across the living room floor before Paige could turn around, right up to the gap behind the couch, right up to the dog the whole world had labeled dangerous. By the time Paige saw her, Junie was already there, sitting in front of the corner, both tiny hands reaching into the dark. Paige froze. She didn't dare move, she didn't dare breathe. And Tank, who had not let a single human being touch him in over 100 days, who had flinched from every hand that ever came near him, who had spent 71 days facing a concrete wall, waiting to be given up on, slowly lowered his enormous scarred head, and he pressed it gently into the baby's open hands. Junie laughed, a bright, delighted, full-body baby laugh, and Tank, for the first time since anyone had known him, leaned in. Some moments you carry with you for the rest of your life. Paige knew, kneeling there on that laundry-strewn floor, that she was watching one of hers. If that just put a lump in your throat, you already understand exactly what this channel is for. Wes came home that evening to find his wife on the floor and the foster dog they were supposed to return on Saturday lying with his big scarred head in their daughter's lap. He stood in the doorway for a long time, not saying anything. Then he set down his keys, crossed the room, and very slowly lowered himself to the floor with the rest of them. Nobody in that house ever said the word return again. After that afternoon, something in Tank simply opened. He began coming out of the corner during the day, first just to lie where he could see Junie, then closer, then close enough that she could grab fistfuls of his fur and haul herself up to standing against his side. He learned that hands could be gentle. He learned that a dropped pan was not the end of the world. He learned, at whatever age he was, how to be a dog. And for the first time in his whole life, he had a place where he was allowed to stay. The notch in his ear never grew back. The scar on his muzzle never faded. Tank carried the proof of his old life on his body for the rest of his days. But he stopped flinching, and he never went back to that corner again. There was one more thing. Once Tank healed, he gave himself exactly one job, and it had nothing to do with guarding the house or scaring off strangers. Every night when Junie went down, Tank lay on the floor beside her crib, and on the nights she woke up crying from a bad dream, before Paige could even get down the hall, there was already a low, soft rumble coming from that room, a sound somewhere between a hum and a sigh. The sound of a once broken dog telling a little girl that she was not alone in the dark. He knew that feeling better than anyone alive. He had decided she would never have to. Paige sent Donna a video about 3 weeks later. Nothing dramatic, just Tank stretched out in a sunbeam on the living room floor while Junie used his rib cage as a pillow, the two of them half asleep. Donna called her back crying. In 19 years, she said, she had learned not to hope too hard for the corner dogs, the ones who face the wall. Keep that video, she told Paige. Show it to the next family who says a broken dog can never come back, because most people never get to see the part where the wall finally comes down. Stories like Tank's are too good to keep to yourself, especially when somewhere out there right now, a dog in the back corner of a kennel is still waiting for someone to stay. People want to believe a broken dog is broken forever, that whatever happened to them in the dark can never be undone. But Tank spent 71 days facing a wall, and it took one baby, one afternoon, and one moment of trust to prove the whole world wrong. He was never dangerous. He was never beyond saving. He was just waiting, the way the broken ones always are, for someone to refuse to give up on him. And if you ever meet a dog the world has written off as too far gone, remember Tank in the corner of Kennel 9. Sometimes the only thing they were ever missing was one person willing to wait. Because sometimes the ones who hide in the corner aren't hiding from us. They're hoping with everything they have left that this time someone will finally come looking. So tell me honestly, do you believe a dog who hid in a corner for 71 days can truly heal, or do they only ever learn to hide it a little better? Tell me in the comments.